I'll just give you a really quick overview of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So hopefully to any of you who have applied to the NSF before, this is not news to you, that these are the two review criteria of all NSF grants proposals. And the intellectual merit I like to categorize as sort of why is this important to the field and why are you the right person to do it. The broader impacts is really the why is this important to society. How would you explain this to a non-scientist or to somebody widely and wildly out of your field? How would you like to pitch this up, frankly, so that the NSF can explain to Congress why they gave you the money to do this work? Why is it important? And in the Office of Research Development, being led by Associate Vice Chancellor for Research, Eliana Perrin, who couldn't be here today, she sends her regards. We've done some analyses of recent proposals from UNC faculty members to NSF, trying to characterize and categorize some of the different broader impacts that have been included in their successful proposals. This is just sort of a very big picture of some ideas to have you brainstorm generally about ways in which you can think that your NSF project the way that you can voice your broader impacts for your project and for the efforts that you're going to do under the work. I think that it's really important to emphasize that the review criteria, the balance of the review criteria varies across directorates, across divisions, even sometimes across programs within the divisions. But the trend line across the NSF is that broader impacts are becoming more and more important to obtaining successful proposals. Sometimes this is a very explicit trend at the level of program officers being told by their division directors or by the directors of the directorates that they should explicitly pay more attention to broader impacts. Sometimes it's just implicitly it's happening because as the funding lines get lower and lower and there's a bare minimum, you've got to bring your intellectual merits to the table to even be in the game. But the number of people who are bringing really strong intellectual merits in their NSF proposals vastly swamps the dollars available to fund those proposals. And so if you don't also bring strong broader impacts, you're really doing your disservice. I'm embarrassed to admit that my last rejected NSF proposal, maybe I told some of you this last time, I'm embarrassed to admit that some of the biggest negatives on my last NSF rejected proposal were that I didn't bring strong enough broader impacts to the table. And I bear that soul and too much information to you to say we've all done it. There's no harm in doing it. Except for that you didn't get the money, that's the harm. And the goal here is really the theme of these two workshops that we've run, and that I think we're going to run more of these next academic year, continue doing this, is to really try to bring together faculty with initiatives that are already ongoing on campus, really just to provide information to you. I think the biggest feedback we've gotten from a lot of faculty has just been recurring versions of, we didn't know that that option was available. We didn't know that that initiative on campus was already happening. And so if you don't know about these things, then it's obviously impossible for you to plug into some of them. So to that end, today we've got three great people representing three different organizations on campus to come tell you about what their organization is about, and then we'll get to, you might be looking up front and saying there are two. Krista is on her way from the airport, she swears, but the last I heard from her, her flight was at least an hour delayed. So if she doesn't show up by the end, then I will try to be Krista, or a much lesser version of Krista, to talk about undergraduate research. But then what I really want to get us to is some discussion with our three presenters today about, so we can just kind of have some freewheeling discussion and you can get your questions answered as they come up. So with that, the first of our speakers today is Rich Superfine, representing the Be a Maker, what do we call you, Project Initiative Network. You're a network.
Network.
And Rich is really the one who has been, this is supposed to be clicking out, Rich is really the one who's been, from the faculty side, helping make all of this happen over the last, God, how long have we been doing this now? Year and a half, 2 years?
No, it's probably about 3 years.
3 years.
2.5 years since we first.
So oops. There you are. Okay.
Great.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, and everybody should feel free to ask me questions and stop me as we go through this. I see a lot of people here are friends, and I know you folks already. So BeAM is it's a network of spaces and facilities, but it's also, most important, it's building a community of people and activities. And so there are 5 things that we consider to be important for what we're trying to accomplish. One is learning, and that means kind of curricula, things with course numbers. Second thing is research, and that means your activities that include everything from building scientific instruments to studio art, costumes for theater and set design. So research is broadly conceived across university activities. But it also means advanced workshops that are perhaps outside of course numbers, but are needed for graduates, undergraduates, faculty, and staff to build the skills they need to do great research. I'll talk more about that later. Innovation entrepreneurship means startup companies. So we support university-supported startup companies, but also even stuff before, in early stages on their way to getting out. Student life. So that means the stuff that engages students outside of courses and the research, but gets into their everyday world and how we make making part of that. And then finally, outreach. So that's K-12, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So making is where ideas turn into things. So this is electronics, it's plastics, it's 3D printing, it's textiles, it's ceramics, it's all of it. This typically already happens in places like the UNC Art Lab, like the Theater Set Shop, like the Physics Machine Shop. What's different now about what we're trying to accomplish is to set up the facilities and the training facilities, the training activities that bring people outside of their own departments, so that to really establish a community of making that cuts across all the disciplines on campus. The mission and vision here is really to embolden the students to get out of the way they normally think of things, the way they normally think of scholarship in their lives, but to actually get into the shop and to make things a reality. And there's a boldness to that. Part of the boldness is picking up a power tool. I don't know if you remember the first time you picked up a power saw. It's a liberating experience. And you're overcoming a lot of issues if you've gotten to 20, 21 years old and you've never picked up a power tool. And so that's part of the experience these students should go through. So the goal in the end is that 50% of all undergraduates experience BeAM, 50% of all research groups experience BeAM, and that eventually over the time we're open as often as the rec center is open and that the library is open. So something about 80 hours a week. So again, these are the 5 buckets, and I'm going to step through them one by one to give you a sense of how these map onto broader impacts that you might do. I'll try to constantly thread that through our discussion. So this is a network. So is there a pointer up here? That's all right. So right now we have the Haynes Art Center up there. That's a 1,200 square foot space that's open. Murray Hall is soft opening. The Keenan Science Library is open. In the future, we expect to be partnering with a space in computer science, environmental sciences, and engineering. We'll also possibly be transforming into a makerspace type format. The Moorhead Planetarium is going to be opening a space up in about a year, and I can eventually, if I forget, someone should ask me more specifically about Moorhead. And then there's the residence halls. The Keenan Science Library is actually the first makerspace to open. So they have about a 400 square foot space that does some 3D printing, consultation on 3D printing and design, also some textiles and some electronics. It's a great collaboratory facility, and it really complements well the new space that I'll talk a little bit more about in Murray Hall. The 1,200 square foot space in Haynes includes extensive woodworking capability, plastics, fabrication. It includes 3D printing, laser cutting, and vinyl cutting as well. And we've done most of our workshops and trainings in that space. The Murray Hall space, again, is it's open right now in the sense of visiting it. The contractors just turned the keys over to us. If you're interested, please contact me, and I'd be delighted to set up an individual tour of the space and talk about your project in more detail. It's a phenomenal space. It's really amazing. BeAM at Carmichael Hall, so we're going to be opening up a space in Carmichael Residence Hall. This is right across from the football stadium in fall of 2017, and we're going to be setting up pop-up makerspaces in the residence halls over the coming year. So let's skip through these 5 kind of touchstones or focus areas within BeAM and how they might be useful to you. So courses. So the goal here is we can host courses in our spaces. We can help you understand how to incorporate making into your own courses in your own classrooms. And we could host you for parts of your courses. You may decide that for what you need, you want to bring students in for 2 sessions, but you don't want your whole course located in our space. So it's anything in between. Kelly Hogan up there had a 200-student chemistry class. We set up a program where they came through our space, 25 students at a time. So there's even ways of handling large lecture formats and introducing making into what those classes are trying to accomplish. For research, again, we hold advanced workshops, but also support individual projects that the research groups are trying to accomplish. So again, it might be that within your broader activities, you want to establish some advanced training for graduate students or undergraduates that are getting into research. So it was funny, when I first started putting this group together along with Peter, I was asked by Ed Samolsky if I was just doing this for myself in a selfish way. And I laughed, like, that's ridiculous. But then I started thinking about it, and I was doing this very selfishly, in fact. I have graduate students coming into my group. My group builds world-class instruments, and my students don't know how a screw works. They literally do not know how a screw works. So they'll take a hex head socket screw, and they'll try to turn it with a Phillips head screwdriver. And you could have a little bit of success with that, but if there is an affront to nature, it is seeing a student take a Phillips head screwdriver to a hex head socket screw. So I think workshops are really important to build up the skill level. I also have staff in my group who need to shift what they're working on to take on a field that they may not have originally been trained on in graduate school. Where they get the training to move from software for visualization to software for real-time microscope control. They forget their electronics. They took that 10 years ago. Where do they go to start learning about that? So these workshops will be meant to really serve the research community, and most important, bring all the people together in those workshops from across campus so people really start meeting each other. Entrepreneurship. So this includes university startups. It includes programs. So we're working with Sam Lai has a new initiative. It's called the EI Lab, and it's innovation entrepreneurship for graduate students and postdocs. So he's taking them through like an 8-month process of training and tackling specific problems that are offered from across the university. So this is kind of more of a training that's geared towards a more advanced community on campus and more geared towards entrepreneurship as opposed to kind of scholarly publication. Student life. So one of the programs here that is pointed out here is a Maker in Residence program as an example. So we take applications from makers in the community. In this particular case, it was an amateur astronomer, and we helped him set up a program of it occurred over about 6 weeks. About 15 students were accepted into it, so they had to apply and were accepted. And they went through a series of workshops that eventually resulted in them assembling this telescope. It's a functional telescope. It now resides in the Keenan Science Library. Students can take it out for sky watching nights down at Jordan Lake. You can see on their own initiative, they decided to paint the barrel with a starry night. And so that's a fantastic program as as a broader impact for you to set up a program which is open to all students to come in and execute something like that would be fantastic. On the lower left is a project by Abby, who is a biostatistics undergraduate freshman, never touched the tool until she came to UNC, participated in this program, and now she's making bookshelves that have a Lord of the Rings theme using laser cutter and bandsaws, and it's phenomenal to see students grow in this way and bring, again, this stuff into their own lives. I want to also post an advertisement here for what's going on in the Keenan Science Library. So their makerspace there is part of the BeAM network. So they do specific trainings. They also are really set up immediately to support you with curricular development projects that you might have. Clearly, over the next 6 months, we're going to be challenged within BeAM in bringing new staff on board and with helping you with specific input into your projects. Certainly, you should ask me about requests that you have and insights that you want to have. I'd be delighted to talk with you, but we'll also certainly get together with Danny and Mizzy in the Keenan Science Library about how to approach those projects in a really mature way. We're also partnering with the Center for Faculty Excellence and I. Williams there, because inevitably, if you really want to make a broader impact project look mature, you include evaluation. It really sets the next bar. In other words, you don't just say, I'm going to make kids really excited, but you say, we're going to evaluate the excitement these kids have, and that further it has an impact in some other way in their lives or their scholarship. And so between myself with some of the broader facilities we'll have available, and Danny and Mizzy, who's the Keenan Science Librarian, and I. Williams, I think you'll really be able to come out with something that's really interesting. And so this is an example of a faculty member, who sometimes concepts are better represented in three-dimensional objects as opposed to thinking about something that's functional. So here, this is a phase diagram, a three-dimensional phase diagram, and he printed out with the 3D printer to be able to convey a complex concept to students better than the projections that are printed in the standard textbook.